He risked his life for the Apache woman, and his scars told the story of love. He had spent many years exploring these wild lands, mapping the hidden trails and learning the ways of the frontier. Life on the edge of civilization had taught him caution, patience, and the quiet understanding that the desert could be as dangerous as it was beautiful. He was used to solitude, but he never thought he would find a story unfolding in the middle of nowhere that would change his life forever. Daniel's horse stumbled slightly on loose stones, and he tightened his grip on the reins. His eyes scanned the canyon walls, always alert for movement, whether it was wildlife or other humans. The wilderness was not forgiving. One wrong step, one careless decision, and it could all end in an instant. Yet there was a freedom here, a sense of life untamed, that Daniel could never find in towns or settlements. He thrived in the solitude, even though it sometimes felt heavy. As he rode deeper into the canyon, he noticed something unusual. At first, it was just a flicker of movement near a thicket of rocks. Then he saw her, an Apache woman, crouched low, her dark hair tangled and dusty. She appeared injured, leaning against the rocks as if the weight of the world was pressing on her. Daniel felt a jolt of concern. The Apache tribes and settlers had a long history of conflict, and he knew the risks of approaching. But something about her, her fragility, her quiet dignity, stirred a protective instinct he could not ignore. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible so as not to frighten her. "Are you hurt?" he called softly, his voice steady but gentle. The woman's eyes met his, wide and wary, filled with a mixture of fear and suspicion. Daniel could see the redness of blood on her arm, a deep cut that had been wrapped hastily, probably by her own hand. She said nothing, only shook her head slightly, a silent warning. Daniel crouched a few feet away, careful not to invade her space. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I just want to help." The words felt strange on his lips, as if speaking kindness in this harsh land was almost unnatural, but he meant them. He had seen too much pain in the wilderness, too much suffering to ignore someone in need. Slowly she lowered her gaze, her breathing shallow, and he could see the tension in her body begin to ease just a little. He moved closer, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Can I see your arm?" he asked, trying to sound calm. She hesitated but eventually allowed him to inspect the wound. It was a deep gash, and Daniel could tell it needed proper care. With the supplies in his pack, he cleaned the wound and carefully wrapped it again, making sure it was secure. She flinched at first but stayed still, her eyes never leaving his face. As he worked, Daniel thought about the many dangers that could follow. Helping her could make him a target among settlers who might see this as betrayal. There were patrols nearby, and the land was unforgiving to anyone who ventured too far from safety. Yet, he couldn't walk away. The instinct to protect, to offer help where it was needed, was stronger than fear. By the time he finished, the sun had dipped lower and the shadows in the canyon grew longer. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but clear. "Why do you help me?" she asked. There was no accusation in her tone, only curiosity and perhaps a hint of disbelief. Daniel looked at her and shrugged slightly. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Because nobody deserves to be left alone when they're hurt." She studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words, then nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of trust beginning to form. Daniel offered her some water from his canteen. She took it cautiously, her hands trembling slightly. It was a small gesture, but in that moment it felt monumental. They sat together, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the canyon and the distant call of birds returning to their nests. For the first time, Daniel felt a connection that went beyond the ordinary. It was quiet, tentative, but it was there. Over the next few hours, he helped her to a safer spot, sheltered from the wind and the jagged rocks. He made a small fire, not too large to draw attention, and prepared a simple meal from his provisions. She watched him with careful curiosity, her eyes flicking between his movements and the flames. They didn't speak much, but the unspoken understanding between them grew. In the wilderness, words often mattered less than actions. Daniel learned that her name was Naeli. She didn't tell him much about her past, and he didn't push. There was a quiet dignity in her silence, a strength that spoke louder than any words. He respected that. For her part, Naeli observed him carefully, noting his calm confidence and the careful way he moved through the harsh landscape. He was different from the men she had encountered before. There was a gentleness to him, a willingness to help without expecting anything in return, and it made her wary heart soften just a little. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and the desert's cold crept into their bones. Daniel offered her a blanket, which she accepted silently. They sat close, not touching but sharing the warmth of the small fire. He could feel the tension in her body slowly ease, and he knew that the first step toward trust had been taken. It was a fragile beginning, but it was enough. That night, as the stars stretched endlessly overhead, Daniel thought about how unusual it was to feel so responsible for another person. He had wandered these lands alone for years, relying only on himself, yet here he was, compelled to protect someone he had just met. It was unfamiliar territory, both physically and emotionally, and it made his heart race in a way that was new to him. For Naeli, the quiet presence of someone who chose to stay rather than flee was foreign and unsettling, yet comforting. It was the first spark of hope she had felt in a long time. In the following days, Daniel helped Naeli regain her strength. They shared small tasks, collecting water, tending to the fire, and moving carefully through the canyon trails. Their conversations were sparse but meaningful. Daniel told her about the land, the hidden water sources, and the safe paths. Naeli, in turn, shared pieces of her world, the knowledge of plants that healed, the signs in the land that told stories, and the ways her people survived. Through these exchanges, a bond began to form, built on mutual respect, understanding, and the slow unfolding of trust. Even as danger lingered at the edges of their world, Daniel felt a strange sense of peace. He had faced wild animals, storms, and treacherous terrain, yet nothing had been as unpredictable or profound as meeting Naeli. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, and though he couldn't fully understand her life, he felt a deep desire to protect her, not just from physical harm, but from the harshness of a world that often showed little compassion. For Naeli, Daniel was a lifeline. She had learned to rely on herself in ways most people couldn't imagine, but here was someone who extended a hand without judgment, without expectation. In a world that had taught her to be wary of outsiders, Daniel's presence was a revelation. She began to see that not all men were enemies, and that trust, though fragile, could be found in the most unexpected places. By the end of the first week, their bond was undeniable. Daniel's careful protection, combined with his quiet kindness, had broken through Naeli's walls of caution. She began to smile more, laugh softly at his small jokes, and even share stories from her past. Each day brought a new understanding, a step closer to the connection that was growing between them. It was not yet love, but it was the seed of something deeper, planted in the shared experience of survival, respect, and human kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Daniel and Naeli sat by the fire in comfortable silence. The canyon around them seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the quiet miracle of their meeting. Daniel looked at her, seeing not just the woman who had wandered injured into his path, but a person of courage, strength, and beauty. Naeli looked back at him, recognizing the same qualities, the same humanity, in a man she had first feared. That night, as they settled into sleep, the first part of their story had been written, not in words, but in actions, in care, and in the fragile trust that had begun to bloom between them. The wilderness around them was still harsh, the dangers still real, but for the first time, both Daniel and Naeli felt the stirrings of hope. They had found something rare in the vastness of the canyon, a human connection that promised courage, protection, and the possibility of love. And so, under the blanket of stars and the watchful gaze of the desert, their journey together began, a journey that would test their limits, challenge their fears, and leave marks on their bodies and hearts that no one else could understand. It was the beginning of a story where courage met compassion, where the human spirit found resonance in another soul, and where every scar would one day tell the story of love. The morning sun rose slowly over the canyon, spilling golden light across the rugged landscape. Daniel woke first, as usual, listening to the soft rustle of wind through the rocks and the quiet breathing of Nayeli beside the fire. She had slept fitfully, her arms still aching from the injury, and Daniel could see the tension in her body even as she rested. He knew the days ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to help her regain strength and confidence. After a simple breakfast of dried meat and bread, Daniel encouraged Nayeli to move slowly. He knew the muscles weakened from injury could be stubborn, and he wanted to avoid any sudden strain. "We'll take it easy today," he said gently. Nayeli nodded, her dark eyes filled with cautious trust. For the first time, she allowed herself to rely on someone else, and that was not an easy thing for her. Years of hardship had taught her to depend only on herself, but Daniel's patience and care began to chip away at the walls she had built around her heart. As they traveled through narrow canyon trails, Daniel shared stories of his life in the wilderness. He spoke of the animals he had encountered, the storms he had survived, and the nights when the stars had seemed to stretch forever across the sky. Nayeli listened quietly at first, her gaze on the horizon, but slowly she began to share her own stories. She told him about her family, about the tribe she came from, and about the lessons she had learned in the harsh world around her. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of experience, and Daniel listened with respect. The bond between them grew stronger with each shared story. They began to understand each other not just as individuals, but as people shaped by the challenges of their world. Daniel admired Nayeli's courage, the way she had survived despite the dangers around her. Nayeli, in turn, respected Daniel's bravery and his unwavering kindness. It was a slow process, but trust was forming between them, delicate yet unbreakable in its own way. As the day wore on, Daniel noticed the tension in the land. Scouts from nearby settlements often patrolled the canyons, wary of any travelers. Helping an Apache woman was risky. Some settlers would see it as betrayal, even treachery. Daniel was aware of this danger, yet he felt no hesitation. Protecting Nayeli had become more than an act of kindness. It was a matter of conscience. Every step he took alongside her was a decision to stand against prejudice and fear, and he accepted that responsibility fully. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small, hidden spring. The water was clear and cool, a rare gift in the arid canyon lands. Daniel helped Nayeli drink, holding the small water skin for her as she leaned down. She closed her eyes, savoring the relief, and for a moment they both allowed themselves to forget the dangers that surrounded them. In that quiet space, the canyon seemed less hostile, and the world beyond the cliffs felt distant. It was a moment of peace, earned through hardship and trust. While Nayeli rested by the spring, Daniel began scouting the surrounding area. He knew that remaining in one place too long could attract unwanted attention. He moved silently, observing the cliffs and valleys, noting every hidden path and every shadow that might hide danger. Daniel had learned long ago that survival depended on vigilance, and he applied that lesson carefully. Returning to Nayeli, he shared a few tips about finding safe routes and hidden shelters. She listened closely, her respect for his knowledge growing with every word. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the reality of danger returned. Daniel spotted distant figures on a ridge, men from a nearby settlement, armed and watching the canyon below. He knew their presence meant trouble. Helping an Apache woman was considered a serious offense by some, and Daniel realized they could not linger near the spring. He gestured for Nayeli to move quietly with him, and together they slipped through narrow trails, using every skill they had to remain unseen. The journey was tense. Every sound, the snap of a branch, the rustle of loose stones, could reveal their position. Daniel kept his hand near the hilt of his knife, ready to defend Nayeli if needed. Nayeli, though weaker from her injury, followed closely, trusting his guidance. Their bond, strengthened through days of care and conversation, became a lifeline. In the wilderness, trust was as vital as food or water, and each relied on the other completely. By nightfall, they found a small cave hidden beneath a rocky overhang. It was not much, but it offered shelter from the cold and a place to rest safely. Daniel made a small fire near the entrance, careful not to draw too much attention, while Nayeli tended to her arm once more, cleaning the wound and wrapping it with strips of cloth. Daniel watched silently, impressed by her resilience and determination. Even in pain, she remained composed, and he admired her strength more with each passing hour. That night, as they shared a quiet meal of dried meat and bread, their conversation turned to their hopes and fears. Daniel spoke of the loneliness he had felt in the wilderness, of nights spent under the stars wishing for someone to share the quiet beauty with him. Nayeli listened, understanding the longing in his words. She had known loneliness herself, a different kind but equally profound, and she recognized the need for connection in his story. As they sat by the small fire, a subtle shift occurred between them. The bond of trust began to deepen into something more. It was not yet love, but it was the beginning of a connection that neither could ignore. Daniel found himself drawn to Nayeli's quiet strength, her resilience, and the way her eyes reflected both intelligence and compassion. Nayeli, in turn, noticed the kindness in Daniel's actions, the courage in his every step, and the unwavering commitment to her safety. The next few days passed in a rhythm of cautious exploration, care, and conversation. Daniel taught Nayeli more about surviving in the harsh canyon lands, from finding safe drinking water to spotting signs of predators. Nayeli shared knowledge of the land that only someone from her tribe could know, the medicinal properties of certain plants, the secret trails hidden among the cliffs, and the signs that warned of danger before it arrived. Together, they became a team, each learning from the other, each respecting the other's wisdom. One afternoon, as they rested in a shaded alcove, Daniel noticed the beginnings of a scar on Nayeli's arm where the wound had been. It was a reminder of how close they had come to disaster, but also of her resilience. He offered her a small, encouraging smile. "You're stronger than you realize," he said. Nayeli looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a quiet admiration. She had learned to survive on her own, but now she realized that strength could also be found in trust, in allowing someone else to walk beside her. Their journey was not without tension. Every rustle in the canyon, every distant shout, reminded them that danger was never far. Yet, facing these challenges together forged a bond that was impossible to break. Daniel's careful guidance and Nayeli's courage complemented each other perfectly. Each day they traveled, their trust deepened, their understanding of one another grew, and the seed of something greater, something that would one day become love, was planted firmly between them. As the sun set on the fourth day of their journey, they found a hidden ridge overlooking the canyon. The view was breathtaking, with the cliffs bathed in golden light and shadows stretching across the valleys below. Daniel and Nayeli stood side by side, silently taking in the beauty around them. For a moment, the hardships, the dangers, and the uncertainty faded. They were just two people sharing a quiet, perfect moment in a vast and unforgiving land. That evening, as they settled by a small fire in a sheltered alcove, they shared stories of their pasts, their families, and their dreams. Daniel spoke of the people he had met in his travels, the friends he had lost, and the lessons the wilderness had taught him. Nayeli shared tales of her tribe, the traditions that had shaped her, and the hopes she carried for the future. Their voices intertwined with the crackling fire and the whispering wind, creating a tapestry of connection that neither had expected to find. By the time they went asleep, the canyon was quiet, the stars stretching endlessly overhead. Daniel and Nayeli lay close enough to feel the warmth of the small fire, yet respectful of each other's space. The days of growing danger, shared knowledge, and cautious trust had brought them closer than either could have imagined. The bond formed through mutual care and understanding was no longer fragile. It had begun to strengthen into something enduring, a quiet promise that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead together. And so, the second part of their journey ended, not with grand gestures or dramatic battles, but with the slow, steady building of trust and connection. They had faced danger, shared knowledge, and begun to understand the power of relying on another human being. In the harsh wilderness, where every day brought new threats, they had found something rare and precious, a partnership, a friendship, and the first stirrings of love that would shape the rest of their story. The canyon had grown colder in the early morning, the wind slicing through the narrow trails like a sharp blade. Daniel stirred first, as he often did, scanning the surrounding cliffs with cautious eyes. The wilderness was never forgiving, and the dangers that came with it were constant reminders of how fragile life could be. Nayeli stirred beside him, shivering slightly, the injury on her arm still tender. Daniel offered her a blanket, which she accepted with a quiet nod. They had grown accustomed to the routine of survival, each step carefully measured, each moment taken with caution. That morning, as they prepared to move deeper into the canyon, Daniel noticed fresh footprints in the dust. They were not from wildlife. Someone, or more than one, had passed through recently. His heart tightened. They were far from any settlement, yet the desert was never truly empty. Bandits, hostile patrols, or men suspicious of travelers could appear at any moment. He signaled for Nayeli to stay close and whispered, "We need to move carefully. Follow my lead and don't make a sound." She nodded silently, trusting him completely, her eyes reflecting both fear and determination. They advanced slowly, stepping over loose rocks and weaving through narrow passages. Daniel kept his senses alert, listening for even the faintest hint of movement. Nayeli, despite her weakened arm, moved with surprising agility, her experience in the wilderness showing through every careful step. They had become a team, their movements synchronized, each anticipating the other's actions. Trust had become their greatest weapon. Suddenly, a shout echoed across the canyon. Daniel froze, listening intently. More voices followed, harsh and urgent, the sound of men closing in fast. Bandits. He could see their shadows now, moving along the ridge above. There was no time to run blindly. He grabbed Nayeli's hand and pulled her toward a narrow side trail, hidden by rocks and brush. "Stay close," he whispered, urgency in his voice. Nayeli's grip tightened on his hand, her confidence in him unwavering despite the fear gnawing at her heart. The bandits were armed, shouting threats and demands as they moved down the canyon trail. Daniel knew that a confrontation was inevitable if they were caught in the open. He scanned the terrain, searching for an advantage. Ahead, he spotted a series of jagged rocks forming a small alcove, just large enough to conceal them. "Here," he whispered, guiding Nayeli inside. They pressed themselves against the rocks, holding their breath as the bandits' voices grew louder. The echoes of their steps bounced off the canyon walls, sending a shiver down Daniel's spine. Time stretched as the bandits searched nearby, their eyes scanning every shadow. Daniel remained perfectly still, his hand lightly resting on Nayeli's shoulder to reassure her. She kept her breathing shallow, her mind racing but her body obedient to his quiet guidance. It was a test of patience and courage, a moment where fear could easily overpower them. Yet through the tension, their bond grew stronger. They had survived the wilderness together, but now survival required something even more profound: complete trust in one another. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the bandits moved on, their voices fading into the distance. Daniel waited several long minutes before daring to breathe fully. He looked at Naeli, whose face was pale but resolute. "We're not safe yet," he said gently, helping her stand. "We need to keep moving, stay low, and find a safer place." She nodded, her admiration for him deepening. It wasn't just his skill that impressed her, but his calm under pressure, his ability to think clearly even when danger was imminent. They continued their journey, moving deeper into the canyon and relying on hidden trails and knowledge of the land to avoid detection. Daniel led the way, pointing out hidden paths and safe spots where they could rest briefly. Naeli followed, her trust in him absolute, though her mind raced with the reality of the danger they had just faced. She realized that she had never experienced someone so devoted to her safety, someone willing to risk everything to ensure she remained unharmed. The realization filled her with a mix of gratitude and a growing affection she did not yet fully understand. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small clearing near a narrow stream. The water was cool and clear, a rare gift in the arid canyon lands. Daniel encouraged Naeli to drink and rest briefly, carefully observing her movements to ensure her arm did not strain. As she drank, he studied her face, noticing the lines of tension that had begun to ease. She was stronger than he had first imagined, resilient in ways that inspired him. He felt a surge of admiration for her courage and a protective instinct that had only grown stronger since the moment he first found her injured in the canyon. The respite was short-lived. As they prepared to continue, Daniel heard the faint sound of hooves and voices approaching. Another group of men, likely scouts from the settlements, was moving quickly through the canyon. This time, escape would not be as simple. Daniel scanned the terrain and spotted a steep ridge leading to a small cave entrance hidden by boulders. "We have to climb," he said, urgency in his voice. "It's our only chance." Naeli looked at the ridge, then back at him, trusting his judgment without hesitation. The climb was treacherous. Loose rocks shifted underfoot, and the incline tested both of them to their limits. Daniel helped Naeli, guiding her steps and ensuring her wounded arm did not bear too much weight. Every slip or misstep could mean disaster, but they pressed on, their determination stronger than fear. The sound of pursuit grew closer, echoing off the canyon walls and spurring them forward. Each movement was a test of endurance, courage, and trust in one another. At last, they reached the cave entrance. Daniel ushered Naeli inside, breathing heavily but relieved. The interior was small and dark, but it offered shelter and a moment to recover. He helped her sit on a flat rock, then pulled out his supplies to tend to her arm once more. She winced slightly but allowed him to work, the pain tempered by the relief of safety. Daniel's hands moved carefully, methodically, his eyes focused but gentle. Every touch, every motion was an act of protection and care. As night fell, the canyon grew silent except for the distant howl of coyotes. Daniel kept watch near the cave entrance while Naeli rested, the adrenaline of the day slowly fading. He thought about the journey ahead and the dangers they would inevitably face. Protecting her had already tested him in ways he had never imagined, and he knew the coming days would demand even more courage and ingenuity. Yet, he felt a deep sense of purpose. This was more than survival. It was a bond forged in shared danger and trust, and he was determined to honor it. Naeli awoke briefly and looked at Daniel. "You always know what to do," she said softly. There was no fear in her voice, only admiration and something deeper, something growing quietly in her heart. Daniel smiled gently, shaking his head. "I just do what I must," he replied. "We survive together and that's what matters." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words. In the midst of fear and uncertainty, they had become a team, each relying on the other completely. The next morning they moved cautiously from the cave, aware that danger could still follow. Their journey was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, understanding, and learning to face the world together. Every challenge, every obstacle brought them closer, and the bond between them deepened in ways neither could have anticipated. Daniel's quiet bravery and Nayeli's resilience complemented each other perfectly, creating a partnership forged in the fires of danger and shared experience. As they descended from the ridge and continued along hidden trails, Daniel and Nayeli spoke more openly than ever before. They shared hopes and fears, dreams for the future, and reflections on the journey that had brought them together. In the harsh canyon lands, where every day was a test of endurance, they had found something rare and precious: companionship, trust, and the beginnings of a love born from courage and mutual respect. By the time the sun dipped below the canyon walls, they found a small, sheltered grove beside a hidden spring. They rested there, exhausted but grateful for the brief peace. Daniel tended to Nayeli's arm once more, ensuring it would not hinder their journey in the coming days. She watched him work, her admiration and affection growing quietly. He had risked his life for her more than once, and every scar he bore was a testament to his bravery and his care. That night, as they settled by the fire, the canyon around them silent and still, both Daniel and Nayeli reflected on what they had endured. They had faced danger, relied on one another, and survived through courage, ingenuity, and trust. The bond between them had grown stronger, evolving into something profound. It was not yet love, but it was the beginning of a connection that neither could ignore. And so, the third part of their journey ended, marked by peril, bravery, and the deepening of trust. They had faced life-threatening danger together, survived against the odds, and discovered the strength that comes from relying on another human being. Every scar, every moment of fear overcome, was a step toward a future where love, trust, and courage would define their story in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. The canyon was quiet that morning, but Daniel could feel a tension in the air, a subtle warning that danger was near. He had learned to read the land, to sense the signs that others might overlook. Nayeli stirred beside him, rubbing her arm where the wound had begun to heal but still ached with every movement. She had grown stronger since their first encounter, but Daniel knew that the challenges ahead would test both of them in ways they could not yet imagine. As they moved along a narrow trail, Daniel paused to scan the ridges above. His instincts were sharp, honed by years of navigating treacherous terrain. There in the distance he spotted movement, men on horseback, riding with purpose and urgency. His heart tightened. These were not travelers seeking help or friendly traders. Daniel recognized the way they rode, the precision in their formation. They were settlers or soldiers, armed and hostile, likely searching for anyone helping an Apache. The situation had escalated beyond what he had feared. He lowered himself beside a rocky outcrop and whispered to Nayeli, "We have company and they're heading this way. We need to be careful." Nayeli's eyes widened, but she did not hesitate. She trusted him completely, her movements mirroring his as they crouched low, hidden from view. The canyon offered little cover, but Daniel's knowledge of the land gave them an advantage. He led her through a series of narrow passages and hidden alcoves, moving silently and deliberately to avoid detection. The men on horseback approached rapidly, their shouts echoing off the canyon walls. Daniel and Nayeli held their breath as the riders scanned the terrain, eyes sharp for any sign of movement. It was a tense moment, every second stretching into an eternity. Nayeli's hand gripped Daniel's lightly, seeking reassurance. He gave her a small nod, a silent promise that he would protect her no matter the danger. In that instant, the bond between them deepened, forged by trust and shared fear. Daniel guided Nayeli toward a hidden ledge above the main trail, a precarious perch that offered safety but demanded careful footing. Each step required precision, and a single misstep could send them tumbling down the rocky slope. Daniel moved first, testing the footing, then helping Nayeli navigate the narrow path. Her trust in him was absolute, and she followed without hesitation. Together, they reached the ledge and crouched behind a boulder, hidden from the riders below. From their vantage point, they could see the men searching the trail, horses snorting and hooves kicking up dust. Daniel observed them closely, noting their numbers and the weapons they carried. He realized that a confrontation was inevitable if they were discovered. The safest option was to remain hidden until the men passed, but even then they would need to move quickly to avoid further danger. He turned to Nayeli, his voice low but steady. "Stay close. We'll wait until they leave, then move carefully." She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as they waited, the canyon silent except for the distant sounds of the riders below. Daniel could feel the tension in Nayeli's body, the way her muscles tensed with every movement of the men. He reached out and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're together," he whispered. "Nothing will happen as long as we watch each other's backs." Nayeli's eyes softened, and for a brief moment the fear that had gripped her eased. The bond between them was no longer just survival, it was becoming something deeper, a connection built on trust, courage, and care. After what felt like hours, the men finally moved on, their shouts fading into the distance. Daniel waited several minutes to ensure they were truly gone before guiding Nayeli down from the ledge. They moved quickly but carefully, each step measured to avoid drawing attention. Their hearts were still racing from the encounter, but relief washed over them as the immediate danger passed. Daniel knew that this was only the beginning. The world they navigated was unforgiving, and further challenges were inevitable. By midday, they reached a small, secluded valley, a hidden pocket of greenery surrounded by towering cliffs. A stream ran through the center, its waters clear and cool. Daniel encouraged Nayeli to rest and drink, his eyes scanning the surrounding cliffs for any signs of further pursuit. She sat by the stream, her hands cupping the water as she drank. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, and she looked at Daniel with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. "You always know what to do," she said softly. Daniel smiled gently, shaking his head. "I just do what I must," he replied. "We survive together, and that's what matters." Nayeli nodded, feeling the truth of his words. In the harsh wilderness, where danger could appear without warning, they had become a team, relying on each other completely. Every challenge they faced together strengthened their bond, and the respect and trust between them grew deeper with each passing day. As the afternoon wore on, they began to explore the valley, searching for a safer route through the canyon. Daniel pointed out hidden paths and potential shelters, teaching Nayeli how to move quietly and observe the terrain. She absorbed every lesson, her eyes sharp and her mind alert. The injury on her arm had healed enough for her to travel more freely, but she remained cautious, knowing that even small mistakes could have serious consequences. During their exploration, they stumbled upon evidence that others had been in the valley recently, footprints near the stream, a broken branch that had been used as a marker. Daniel studied the signs carefully, deducing that these were likely scouts from the settlements, moving cautiously through the canyon. He realized that their presence was not coincidental. They were being hunted, targeted simply for surviving and helping one another. He turned to Nayeli, determination in his eyes. "We have to stay ahead of them. They won't stop until they find us, but we can be smarter, faster, and stronger." She nodded, inspired by his resolve. That evening, they made camp in a small alcove, hidden from view and shielded from the wind. Daniel built a modest fire, careful to keep it small and controlled, while Nayeli rested her arm and tended to minor scrapes and bruises from the day's journey. They shared a simple meal of bread and dried meat, eating in silence for a time, each lost in thought. The events of the day had tested their courage, skill, and endurance, but they had survived together. That survival, shared and hard-won, brought them closer in ways neither could ignore. As night fell, Daniel kept watch near the entrance of the alcove, his eyes scanning the cliffs and ridges for any sign of movement. Nayeli slept lightly, her body exhausted from the day's exertions, but her mind alert to the dangers that might come with the night. Daniel felt a surge of protectiveness, a deep desire to keep her safe at all costs. Every scar he had earned in the wilderness seemed insignificant compared to the risk he was willing to take for her well-being. In the quiet moments, they spoke of their pasts and dreams for the future. Daniel shared memories of his life as a scout and explorer, the lessons he had learned in the harshest conditions, and the moments of loneliness that had defined much of his life. Nayeli spoke of her tribe, her family, and the hardships she had endured. They found solace in each other's stories, comfort in the knowledge that they were not alone. The bond between them was no longer just survival. It was companionship, trust, and the beginnings of love that neither could fully express but both deeply felt. The following days were a careful balance of movement and rest, vigilance and trust. Daniel and Nayeli navigated the canyon with skill and precision, avoiding the patrols that continued to search for them. Every step was measured, every decision weighed carefully, yet through it all, their connection grew stronger. Daniel's courage inspired Nayeli, and her resilience strengthened him. Together, they faced challenges that would have overwhelmed them individually, but together they were formidable. One evening, as they rested by a hidden spring, Nayeli looked at Daniel with a quiet intensity. "You've risked so much for me," she said softly. "I don't know how to repay you." Daniel shook his head, a small smile on his lips. "No repayment is needed," he said. "I do this because it's right and because I care about you. That is all that matters." Her eyes glistened with unspoken emotion, and for a moment the world around them seemed to pause. By the time the sun set behind the canyon walls, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, they had survived another day. The dangers of the world had tested their courage, their trust, and their determination, but they had emerged stronger together. Each scar Daniel bore, each mark of hardship, became a symbol of his bravery and his unwavering commitment to Nayeli's safety. That night, as they settled by the fire, the bond between them was undeniable. It was no longer just trust or survival. It was something deeper, something that could not be ignored. They had faced danger together, confronted external threats, and discovered the strength that comes from standing side by side in the face of adversity. In the quiet of the canyon, under the watchful eyes of the stars, they had begun to understand the true depth of their connection. And so, the fourth part of their journey ended, marked by courage, confrontation, and the deepening of a bond that had been forged in the fires of danger and shared experience. The world around them remained harsh and unforgiving, but together, Daniel and Nayeli had discovered a strength and connection that would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Every scar, every risk, every moment of fear faced together was a testament to the courage and love growing quietly between them. The canyon was calm that morning, the golden sunlight spilling over the cliffs and casting long shadows on the rocky terrain. Daniel and Nayeli had traveled far, surviving dangers that would have tested even the strongest of men and women. Their bond, forged in trust, courage, and shared hardship, had grown into something neither could deny. The scars Daniel bore on his body were proof of the dangers he had faced to protect Nayeli, and each one told a story of sacrifice, bravery, and love. As they made their way through a narrow trail, Daniel scanned the horizon carefully. The danger from hostile patrols had not vanished completely, but they had learned to move with caution, to anticipate threats before they appeared. Nayeli walked beside him, stronger now, her injury fully healed, her eyes bright with determination. They had survived together, and in doing so, had discovered the depth of their trust and reliance on one another. Their destination was a hidden valley that Daniel had discovered months earlier, a place of safety and beauty, untouched by the dangers of the outside world. It was a place where they could finally rest, recover, and live without constant fear. As they approached the valley, they could see the trees swaying gently in the breeze, the water from a clear stream reflecting the sunlight, and the soft green grass stretching across the floor of the canyon. It was a stark contrast to the harsh, rocky paths they had traveled, and the relief they felt was palpable. Once in the valley, Daniel helped Naeli set up a small shelter near the stream. It was simple, but it would provide safety and comfort. They worked together, gathering wood, arranging their supplies, and preparing a small fire. The simplicity of the task was a welcome change from the constant vigilance required on the trails, and it gave them both a sense of peace. Daniel looked at Naeli, her hands busy yet graceful, and felt a warmth in his chest that went beyond the relief of reaching safety. This was more than survival. It was the beginning of a life they could build together. As the days passed in the valley, they established a routine that balanced work, rest, and exploration. Daniel taught Naeli more about survival in the wilderness, showing her how to spot signs of approaching weather, how to find hidden sources of water, and how to move silently through the forest to avoid predators. Naeli, in turn, shared her knowledge of the land, teaching Daniel about plants that could heal, trails that were hidden from view, and the signs of danger that only someone familiar with the terrain could recognize. Their skills complemented each other perfectly, and their partnership grew stronger with each passing day. But safety did not mean boredom or stagnation. Daniel and Naeli explored the valley together, discovering hidden groves, small waterfalls, and the wildlife that called the canyon home. They laughed together, shared stories, and began to dream aloud of a future that, until now, had seemed impossible. Naeli spoke of her family and the traditions she wished to preserve, and Daniel shared his dreams of exploring the land without fear or conflict. In each other's company, they found not just safety, but joy, companionship, and the beginnings of love. One evening, as the sun set behind the cliffs, painting the sky in brilliant hues of red and gold, Daniel and Naeli sat by the stream. The water reflected the colors of the sky, and the soft rustling of leaves created a peaceful melody. Daniel looked at Naeli, seeing not just the woman who had wandered into his life injured and alone, but the person who had become his companion, his equal, and his heart's anchor. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his, and Naeli looked at him with eyes full of trust and affection. "I never imagined finding someone like you," Daniel said softly. "Someone brave, strong, and kind. Someone I would risk everything for, and I would do it again in a heartbeat." Naeli's eyes glistened with emotion, and she squeezed his hand gently. "You've already risked everything," she replied. "And I don't know how to thank you. You've given me a life I never thought possible." In that quiet moment, the words they spoke were not just expressions of gratitude, but acknowledgments of the bond that had grown between them through trials, danger, and unwavering trust. Their conversation that evening marked a turning point. They no longer needed to rely solely on words or actions to communicate their feelings. Every glance, every touch, every shared silence carried meaning. They had faced the dangers of the wilderness together, and those experiences had created a connection that neither could ignore. The scars on Daniel's body, once symbols of struggle and survival, had become markers of devotion and love. Naeli recognized each one as a testament to the depth of his courage and the strength of his heart. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and Naeli built a life together in the hidden valley. They cultivated a small garden, learning to grow food and care for the land around them. They observed the cycles of nature, learned from the animals, and embraced a life that, while simple, was filled with purpose and meaning. In the quiet moments, they spoke of the past, but their focus was on the present and the future they were creating together. Each day strengthened their connection, and their love deepened in ways that were natural, unforced, and enduring. Despite the peace they had found, they remained cautious. The world beyond the valley was still unpredictable, and Daniel taught Nayeli to remain aware of the signs of danger. They practiced moving quietly through the forest, setting traps for protection, and keeping watch during the night. But these precautions no longer felt like burdens. They were a shared responsibility, a testament to their teamwork and mutual care. The knowledge that they could rely on one another made the challenges of the outside world seem more manageable. One afternoon, while exploring a ridge overlooking the valley, Daniel and Nayeli spoke of their dreams for the future. Nayeli expressed her desire to preserve her culture and teach future generations about the land, its plants, and its hidden paths. Daniel shared his wish to explore the wilderness without fear and to protect those who could not protect themselves. They realized that their goals were not just individual, they complemented each other. Together, they could build a life that honored both of their experiences, skills, and values. As the sun dipped below the cliffs one evening, Daniel looked at Nayeli with a quiet intensity. "Every scar on my body tells a story," he said. "A story of the dangers I faced, but also of the love that gave me the courage to face them. Every risk I took was for you, and every scar reminds me of that." Nayeli's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of gratitude and love. "And I see them," she said softly. "I see your courage, your strength, and your heart. Each one tells me how deeply you care." In that moment, the unspoken promise between them was complete. Their love, forged in trials, would endure, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Time passed in the valley, seasons changing, bringing both beauty and hardship. Storms swept through, rivers swelled, and the harsh desert sun tested their endurance. Yet Daniel and Nayeli faced each challenge together, their partnership stronger with every obstacle. They celebrated the small victories, the first harvest from their garden, the successful navigation of a treacherous trail, the quiet moments of laughter shared beside the fire. These victories, though simple, became the foundation of a life built on trust, resilience, and love. Their story eventually became known to neighboring settlements, not through words, but through the respect others had for their courage, skill, and partnership. People spoke quietly of the man who had risked everything for an Apache woman, and of the woman whose bravery and intelligence had matched his own. They were admired not just for surviving the dangers of the wilderness, but for the love and partnership they had cultivated amidst adversity. Daniel's scars, once reminders of pain and struggle, became symbols of devotion, courage, and the enduring strength of love. Years later, Daniel and Nayeli still walked the trails of the canyon together, their bond unbroken. They had faced storms, predators, and human threats, yet their connection had grown stronger with every challenge. They had built a life together, one filled with purpose, respect, and deep affection. Daniel's scars remained, visible reminders of the risks he had taken, but they no longer symbolized fear or pain. They symbolized courage, sacrifice, and love that had endured the tests of time. In the quiet of the valley, surrounded by the beauty of the wilderness, Daniel and Nayeli found something rare and precious. A life defined not by fear or danger, but by trust, courage, and love. Their story, written in scars, shared challenges, and quiet moments of connection, became a testament to the human spirit, the power of devotion, the strength of trust, and the enduring impact of love. And so, their journey ended not with grand battles or dramatic confrontations, but with the quiet triumph of hearts united, a life built together, and the knowledge that every scar, every risk, and every shared moment had led them to this place, a place of safety, joy, and unbreakable love.